Dorothy Spinks was the 12th president of FEW. She has 42 years of service with the departments of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Dorothy served as national president from 1988 to 1990.
My experience within this women's movement really began in 1938 when my own international honorary sorority supported ERA. That was a long time ago, out there in Des Moines. And then when I came to Washington to work, I was appointed to Alice Paul's Women's Joint Legislative Committee for Equal Rights. And Esther is continuing that wonderful work over there at the National Women's Party. So you see, my background has not always been in FEW. It has certainly been for women. And then there was BPW, and that's where I learned parliamentary procedure. And you go on. But all of you, and these ladies especially, belong to many groups, so that the feeling, those threads go out to lots of people, and we do have tremendous impact. Among the few things that occurred during my term, of which I am particularly proud, is the fact that we were a little luckier in the change of administration than my two immediate predecessors, both Marie and Frida, had been. We had a little bit more opportunity to talk with people. And as you heard yesterday morning, the president has been appointing women to higher positions where, when your current president, Jean, goes to talk to them, they are listening, they understand, and we can therefore have even a greater impact than we had before. And of course we had to wait a little while for Connie Newman to report on board, but as soon as she was sworn in, the call went out immediately. Could the two representatives of FEW come for a meeting? Naturally, I asked our first president and founder, Allie, to go with me. When the answer came back, we had an excellent conversation with her and told her that we were concerned about the opportunities available for women and the women's program, the federal women's program, which had been organized years before by the FEW leadership. They had gone in and made recommendations to OPM as to how to develop a training program and an opportunity for women in government to achieve and to be promoted. And as we were leaving, I said to her, it's really of great concern that the women are not at the same high level as we had hoped, and that so many of them were collateral duty, and that our women were not obtaining the same opportunities for training. And she said she'd like to know about that. What could I say? We'll do a study. The study now has been printed. It is available to all of you. And I swear I heard her quote from that study yesterday in her remarks, which makes me extremely proud, because the first task force were all volunteer FEW people. Those who reviewed it and prepared it in final form for Jean were also volunteer FEW members. That's a great feather in our cap. Another thing I said to Connie Newman that night was, we'd like to give a reception for you. She said that would be nice. So I called the office a few weeks later, or maybe days, to ask if she would still be available. And the first question was, do you want her to speak? I said, but of course. But of course. And they said, well, send us a note, pick a day. So my beloved Naval Supply Systems Command has a beautiful big room, and she came. It was the weekend of a board meeting. So here were all our folks in from out of town. She spoke 40 minutes. And then she stood there, and every single person went up the line to shake hands with her. The test of a true lady. And we were so elated. But from the very beginning, we had that smile from her so that we knew that we could work with OPM. And the doors have been opened wonderfully this past year for Jean. This study was important. The meeting with Connie Newman was important. Then another thing that we did was we had been thinking about automating the office. And so I asked our finance chair and Karen Scott, our executive director, to be a little separate task force and find out how we could automate the office and save several $100s a month in the handling of the membership reports. That was a very important step. It's not completely finished, as you heard Karen say yesterday, but they're coming along beautifully. And one of these days, we're just going to be so efficient you won't be able to ask us a question we don't know the answer to, of which I shall be very proud. When I first went into office, I was caught in the position of the IRS. Didn't like some of the things that we'd been printing, and so Karen and I had to go through all the books and find out where we could fork over $4,000 to IRS. Because we had not behaved with our 501c3 status. And we had to do nothing in the legislative arena that would infringe on that again. We did all the right kind of reporting, and we explained that what they challenged as our earning all of that money and having all that money in the bank was not earnings. It was money that ran the organization, and that made a great difference. Most of the money has been refunded to the organization, and that has made it much easier for the organization to function this year, and I am most grateful. But when you go through a sort of depression period like that, you take a good look at what you can do and what you cannot do, and what are the most important things you do. Everyone tightens her belt. Well, his belt too, we had some men around. And we continued to function in the best way that we could to uphold what these leaders had achieved previously. It worked out all right, and I think many of us felt stronger as a result of it. Certainly we've had an increase in chapters, so our name isn't mud, not one bit. We also had a very interesting experience, and this was with our legislative director, Lynn, that a woman from Japan, who apparently was preparing to be the head of the Commission on the Status of Women in Japan, and you know that is a great step forward, visited us, spent some time with Lynn in the office, and I'm sure with other officers, and we had a reception for her, and I don't know what she carried back to Japan. I haven't heard. It doesn't happen to be the same arrangement that Dorothy is going over to Japan for, but she without doubt has met.
I saw her when I was in Japan.
I knew she would. You don't, you know Dorothy Nelms trails people down. We were so pleased when we had a change that we were successful in contacting, or in her contacting us, our current legislative director. She has been absolutely darling. I want to take credit for one particular thing. I looked and looked and looked for an editor. As you know, our editor had moved to Europe, France as a matter of fact, a few years ago. And so at the time, Karen and Chris DeVries had said, well, we'll take over the editorship for about 6 months. Poor things, it lasted 1.5 years. And that was not fair, because that cut down the time they had for their proven responsibilities. So I searched around and found Joan Demeen. Well, I pressed her until finally she said yes. And she has just been super, and I was so delighted when I learned recently that she also accepted Jean's request to serve as public relations chairman. I'd worked on her for that at first, but I didn't succeed. But you know, when you go into a new job and you're not quite positive everything's going to work out right, you've got to wait a little bit and see that the way is clear. I think probably what few has meant to me almost more than anything else is what I was doing in the workshop I had. I called it I Can Too Make a Speech. And if you make a speech, you have a beginning, you have a body, and you have a conclusion. Therefore, you have to plan whatever it is you're doing in order to make the point you want to make. If I have made any point for few, it is that I worked hard, and by golly, we're still going forward.